Thanks a lot. Hi everyone, so I'm Olivier. I've been working at Stripe for 3 years. I work on operations and product. And before that, I was running my own company, which was one of the first crowdfunding platforms in France, which is called SparkUp. But today I'm going to talk to you about online commerce and especially like how to build like for scale. Because I don't know if, are there many entrepreneurs like in the room, like people who have built or are thinking of building like an e-commerce website? Show of hands? A few. So yeah, let's talk about it. Just a quick word on Stripe. The pitch was pretty good, but some words and a few figures. So Stripe is a software platform. We do provide like SDKs and APIs to help like developers and startups and larger companies to monetize and run their online business. Our main product is payments, but we have quite a few now products that help you like run an online business. We have like quite a few users, so more than 100,000 users from all sizes across the globe. These users like come from 25 countries, and we have something like 900 employees at Stripe now. And we raise like some money with renowned investors. And we work with a lot of e-commerce merchants. I'm sure you do recognize some names, like Shopify is a pretty well-known e-commerce like store builder, Teddy Bear, Rad in France. But we also work with other types of business like marketplaces or SaaS like Algolia. And just to say well, Algolia, like we are also using Algolia like for support documentation, and that works pretty well. So before starting, I wanted to take a step back and put in perspective, you know, online commerce as we know today. So this is actually the first Amazon website. It was even before the first one, 1994 and 1995. I think it's easy to criticize, but at the time, I mean, they were the pioneers. I mean, they are the guys like who made e-commerce, you know, something which is popular. They are the ones like who made people like confident, like enough, like, you know, to put their website on their card on a website, buy physical goods, and wait a few days, you know, for these physical goods to ship. So that was 20 years ago. Obviously, it has changed a lot. When you think of it like today, like online commerce, you know, and online payments are all over the place. You can use it like to buy like basic services, like transportation, all sort of goods, like groceries. And finally, you can literally buy from anywhere. I'm sure you guys are aware, like, you know, more and more payments and like purchases like take place on mobile phone. So people are not even sitting at a desktop anymore. So we do not only like buy differently, we also buy like much more online. 20 years ago, that was the Amazon website I showed you, like online commerce, like what represented at the time, like $1 billion, like in annual sales. Today, like it's 1,500x bigger. I don't know for you, but I don't know like many markets of this size that grow like that fast over the same time span. To give you an idea, like $1,500 billion is approximately the GDP of Spain. And the good news for people in the room is that this is not going to stop anytime soon. So today, like online commerce represents approximately 5% of total spendings, total consumer spendings. And we do certainly at Stripe like believe that this is going to keep increasing like pretty steeply. We can debate whether it's going to be like 10, 20, or 50%, but you know, at the end of the day, like, you know, this is going to keep growing. How can we explain, you know, such a change, you know, in terms of scale and way, like, you know, people buy online? I think one of the reasons which is often overlooked is that launching an e-commerce business like is so much easier today than 20 years ago when Amazon was the only one. Let's take a step back. You know, 20 years ago, 2000, like it costed like million, like, you know, of dollars to launch like a decent like e-commerce business. Think of the hosting, like, you know, building your own servers, hosting them, maintaining them, building connectivity, like, you know, to access the web, buying like very expensive licenses, like software licenses. That was pretty expensive. And now today, this is actually the cost of a website. Like for a few thousand, I mean, euros, you know, you can use Stripe, Algolia, AWS, and have a pretty decent like e-commerce store. You know, you don't need like to spend millions. Not only is it cheaper, but like the web tools, like, you know, that developers and startups use are also much better. So this is an actual, like this was I'm not going to say the actual name of the provider, but like this was the standard way like 20 years ago to integrate payments. Like read through 500 pages of specs because it was not designed for startups and entrepreneurs, but like for large corporations that had like thousands of software engineers. Obviously, it's much better. It's much easier today. And so the result is that the technical stack like of e-commerce websites has changed a lot. 20 years ago, your focus was to be good at everything, like from maintaining a server to designing the site, to taking care of the logistics and the manufacturing. Today, the good news is that you only need to focus like on the last mile of the user experience. Like for all like key technical and business functions, like businesses, like tools like Algolia, Stripe, or AWS help you like not reinvent the wheel and focus like on delivering the actual, differentiated like value to your customers. So these were just a few names, but obviously like literally like all key business and technical functions have ready to use and plug and play tools that you should really be leveraging, because I think that's, that's such a nice opportunity. So for instance, like, Cheers, like, a pretty cool, like, e-commerce website like in France that allows you like to buy and print photos online. I mean, obviously they take care of printing the photos, but like for all like the web technology that they use, I mean, they didn't reinvent each time, each feature, each tool. Like they do rely on a set of existing tools, like from emails to collaborations to payment. So now that we have this context in mind, I mean, I wanted to share with you like a few actual tips, concrete tips, and these are based like on discussions and observations we had like with lots of pretty good like e-commerce websites that are seen as innovators. And so I wanted to give you a good tips of what do these good e-commerce websites like in businesses have in common. The first one is that every time, I mean, they think of payments form or payments experience, I mean, they have conversion in mind. So what we did is that we took a look first at some of the largest like e-commerce websites in France, traditional retailers that have been there like for decades, and we compared them to to the payments experience of cool e-commerce websites, I mean, that have been around for a few years and are known to do stuff like pretty well. And what we saw is that the traditional like large e-commerce website systematically had like the same mistakes, the same errors in their UX. For instance, like they didn't like offer any autocomplete on payment details or any one-click payments. They did not validate card number as expiration date while the customer was typing, but they were waiting for the customer to click on buy to actually tell them like, you're missing one digit in the card. They were not mobile responsive, which is a disaster for payments because, everyone hates like, to type like small, to look like across your screen, like for the actual input that you need to enter. And they didn't display like any alphanumeric keyboard, like, on mobile. And finally, they were asking like the customers like to pick a card brand instead of recognizing it like based on the first digit of the card number. And so with that in mind, like we released like a product which is pretty cool, and I think you should leverage it like a few months ago, which is called Stripe Elements. Stripe Elements is essentially like an easy way for you to completely control like the design of your payment form, but to benefit like from all the best practices that I've described to you earlier. For instance, like we allow you to easily, based on the country of your customer, to display some field or to hide them. For instance, like in the UK, like it's pretty common to ask like for the zip code of your customer. In France, that would be like the postal code or no code at all. And on the back end, if there are like any developers like in the room, like building, like coding a good form can be pretty painful, and it's not usually like the most exciting part of the project. And so what we found is that not only like Stripe Elements allows like e-commerce stores to have like better like customer-facing experience, but it's much like quicker to code. So that was the first tip. The second tip to all like e-commerce like stores out there is to offer like a local and mobile buying experience. As you scale, you're not only going to scale, geographically, like, selling to more and more customers like outside France or your home country, but you're also going to serve like customers that are on different devices. And it's often, I mean, it's a graph I love to show in France. Like in France, we come from a country where cards are like the default option when you pay online. Everyone knows card. but that's clearly not a standard like across the globe. If you take a country which is like pretty close from here, like Germany, like cards is actually like less than a quarter of the payments that are made online. Like for the rest, like German people like love to use like bank debits, like wallets, and all sorts of payment methods. And cards, if you only like offer card on a website, I mean that's not going to work well. And the issue, like when you're a customer, an e-commerce website, and that you want to add a new payment method, there are two challenges. The first one is that you have to deal, to go negotiate with each payment method, like, commercials, like, should they be displayed on the website? And second, there is a technical challenge as well. Like you have to deal with a new API and a new design. And so we've been working for a few years like on what we call like the sources API, which is essentially like a single API, a single integration that allows you like to add like payment methods on the go. So essentially, like if you are going to, I don't know, if you're going to Germany and you want to accept like Sofort, which is like a pretty common like a payment method, it's only like a few more lines of codes, like in your integration, and boom, you can accept like Sofort. So that's quite useful when you expand. On mobile, so I'm sure you've seen like Apple Pay launched in France like a year ago. The launch is pretty progressive, but we've seen like more and more banks joining like and supporting Apple Pay for the customers. And I wanted to tell you a story about Apple Pay in the US. So Apple Pay was launched in the US like 3 years ago. It was a full-blown like marketing launch, so it made a lot of noise. And Apple Pay like is remarkably successful on in-app payments. So for customers like who want to buy like something online on Amazon or something else and that own an iPhone, like people use a lot Apple Pay. Like for some of our like largest US like e-commerce websites, I mean between 5 to 10% of all their purchases are on Apple Pay. It facilitates like recurring payments, which is pretty cool for them. And just two examples, like these are marketplaces, but the same applies like to e-commerce. I mean, they see like a huge like jump in conversion rate. So not only like the people like convert, like the customers convert more, but they also complete like their purchase like much quicker. The third tip I wanted to give is fraud. So fraud is usually not a topic like we care about when we launch an e-commerce website, but you should really pay attention as an e-commerce user. Because as an e-commerce like website, I mean, as soon as you start scaling, as soon as you start growing, I can promise you will be targeted at some point by fraudsters. Might not be now, might be in a few months, but fraud, like online fraud, like is a global issue. So this is a graph that shows like the yearly volume of online fraud for payments. And what the story tells like is that essentially fraud is growing like 3 times faster than online payments at the moment. So it is a global issue. And we often talk like with e-commerce websites that lose like up to 3% of their revenues like in fraud because they have like silly rules like in place, silly tools. And it's a bit sad as an e-commerce website like to lose like 3% of your revenue. And so with that in mind, Stripe has released like Radar a year and a half ago, which is a pretty cool like fraud prevention solution that is plug and play for Stripe users, which makes a big difference. As soon as you start using Stripe, you can benefit from Radar, and it automatically scores like all your transactions and compare them to the whole network of transactions we've seen like over the past years across the globe. And second feature, it allows you like to create like smart rules to add some business logic of your own industry like to the model. And finally, the last tip might be a little counterintuitive, but I think like if you take a step back, like more and more like e-commerce businesses like have a marketplace like a side business. You take Amazon, Fnac, like all of them in France, they are building an e-commerce on the side of their traditional business. And I think the reason is that, and Olivier talked about it, like it's a very efficient way to capture the long tail of products and customers. Like you cannot serve like, on your own like millions of products. You have to get some help from actual like other sellers and other like service providers. And so as you scale, like we really encourage like to take a look at this business model because this is really the one which is going to scale like to grow the most like in the coming years. So we looked at forecasts. Like in 2020, we estimate that approximately 40% for all e-commerce purchases in the world will be facilitated like through marketplaces. And if you take a look at countries like China, which are a bit more advanced, like on the topic, like it's already 90% of e-commerce like purchases in China that go through marketplaces. So as you scale, like think of it like it's an option. And so we released a product which is called Stripe Connect, which helps like marketplaces, like both for product and services, like scale and deal, you know, with these the challenges that all marketplaces face. For instance, like when you launch a marketplace, you need to onboard your sellers, you need to verify their identity, you need to facilitate like, you know, the dispatching of the funds and take a commission like on each payment. This can be like pretty hard like to code and build correctly. And so we built Connect in mind like to help you like automate like all these flows and allows you to scale like seamlessly across the globe. So just to wrap up, a few tips for e-commerce businesses to scale well. If you have any question, happy to answer now. Otherwise, I would be happy like to talk to chat in one-on-ones after this. Thank you.
Hi. What is the main type of fraud?
Say again?
The main type of fraud?
The main type of fraud?
Yeah.
The main type of fraud is like you put your card on a payment form which is not secured. The merchant or some like, you know, malicious guy like, you know, intercept the card number and uses it somewhere else.
Okay.
Does that answer my question, or do you have?
So then the client block the card, and then you need to refund.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. And then someone, let's say I stole some cards. I'm going to pay on your website. You're going to say, fine, like new purchases, I'm going to fulfill them. And like a week later, like the bank is going to call you and say, hey, like these two purchases, I mean, they were fraudulent. So you need to refund actually the initial payment.
Yeah, and to pay extra like 20
and
euros.
to pay some extra like fees to the banks,
okay.
exactly. So that's why for an e-commerce, especially for low margin e-commerce businesses, this can be like really painful. And what you want is to prevent the fraud in the first place instead of dealing with it after that.
A related question just on the fraud that you've experienced perhaps in different countries. When you use the platform, do you have different experiences depending on the country in terms of the enforcement and how easy it is to track fraud upon those platforms?
Yeah, so I guess the French like e-commerce businesses out there are unlucky. Like France is by far like the most fraudulent country in Europe. There are lots of reasons for that, but yeah, I mean that's a prize. I guess a trophy we're not proud of. Yeah, there are a few different trends. I mean, to be honest, like fraud is becoming like more and more like cross-European. Like, you know, someone who is going to buy some cards or like to intercept like some card numbers is not likely to buy in their own country. I mean, they would buy in the UK, in Germany. So more and more, I mean, we tend to think of fraud as with a more like holistic approach, you know, like take a look at the broader picture and not look at very country-specific trends, because usually these ones like don't last for long.
Remain. Are you going to go further and become a fintech or?
So that's a broad question. The question was what is the future of Stripe? It's gonna be cool, I guess. No, so the mission of Stripe is to help entrepreneurs, like, you know, run and build online businesses. Like when the founders, you know, like first started the company 7 years ago, like payments was the biggest pain. Like it was a pain. You had like weeks to wait, you know, for the paper to be filled, and, like to build integration. So payment was the biggest pain. But we did identify a few other pains. For instance, we launched Atlas, Stripe Atlas, which helped. Like, this was a year ago, which helps you like expand to the US by like creating a company and a bank account like in a week online in the US. So the thread like between the two is like helping entrepreneurs like run an online business. So I guess that's where we're going.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Olivier.